All right. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining this Neo4j Live. Today, our topic is exploring Cypher Workbench, and I'm very happy to have Eric Monk as a guest today. Hi, Eric. How are you doing?
Great. How are you doing, Alexander? Thanks for having
I'm
me.
good. I'm good. Thank you for joining. Eric, we are colleagues at Neo4j, so you are one of the Neo4j experts, not a community member, as sometimes happenings on this show. So you are um, inside knowledge, basically. But it's good to have you. What are you doing at Neo4j, Eric?
Yeah, good question. So I work in what's called the shared services team, which is a fairly small team. Mainly, we support what's called our go-to-market organization. So that's people that um, are trying to help Neo4j customers basically implement Neo4j or learn about Neo4j. So we support the customer success architects, the sales engineers, and the professional services organization over here where I'm at. Mhm.
Yeah, very cool. And I usually ask this question everybody that joins the show. What brought you into Graph? I mean, obviously you, as you're working for Neo4j, the obviously you're working with graphs. But have you had before, prior to Neo4j, maybe had you had an interest in the technology? How did you end up at Neo4j? Is maybe the better question in your case.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so a quick history. Way back in the day, I was sort of involved with the semantic web technology, so RDF and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. Um, I did work at Mark Logic for a short stint many years ago, and Mark Logic started to have a semantic layer. They were doing things with Sparkle. Um, then I joined a startup company, and we started with Mark Logic, but quickly realized that it didn't scale to the volumes we wanted to have it scale to. And so we found Neo4j, and this was back in like around 2014. So I was with a partner company. And we used Neo4j for about 4 years. And then at that time, I left and actually joined Neo4j as an employee. So I've
Okay.
been with Neo for about 7 years now.
Yeah, wow, very cool. That's,
Hmm.
that's very, very exciting. Yeah, I think that seems to be a case. A couple of our colleagues, I think they worked at an interesting project, and then worked at a customer, and then they kind of say, okay, yeah, this graph technology is fun, it's cool. I want to do more. I want to maybe influence a
Yeah,
little bit where the direction is going, and then end up being a member of the team.
yeah,
So yeah, it's good to have you. So today the topic is Cypher Workbench, and I think we probably need to explain a little bit what it is and what you mean with this.
yeah, definitely.
Before we
If you don't mind,
Yeah.
I'll briefly explain it, and then I have a few slides that we can run through just to kind of set the context and a little bit of history.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I'll definitely go into the sort of the meat of the product and all that stuff. Um,
Yeah, sounds good.
yeah.
I'll switch over here to have your
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah, let me just do a slideshow here.
There we go.
Perfect. Yeah, so we just Alexander just talked to
Okay,
me about this. So we'll skip that one. Um,
yeah.
so quick history about Cypher Workbench. It was released in 2020, but it's been around as a private SaaS offering. So it supports like internal Neo4j users, select customers and partners as of like 2022. And the reason why it was never public until like last year when it got released to labs was you may have been familiar with Arrows. Arrows still exists,
Mhm.
and the old Arrows, I'll call it old Arrows, was kind of clunky, and it's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why Workbench got sort of like chartered to be built. Was that Arrows didn't have a lot of the functionality, which were old Arrows. However, Alistair Jones, he was busy working on like Arrows 2.0 or whatever. Uh, and unfortunately, our groups didn't coordinate well enough, and so there was two modeling things that got done around the same time. And
Okay.
so Philip Rathley, who's now our CTO, but back then he was the chief product officer, he said, we can't have like two like public facing like modeling tools that we're promoting, right? So he just, since Arrows was already out there, he picked Arrows, and Workbench kind of just stayed in the background and was used for private, sort of like this, like I said, private SaaS stuff. So that being said, there's probably been, I don't know, I said on this slide, there's like over 100 organizations have used it. It's probably, if you include like the way our PS people use it, probably more closer to 200 or 300 different organizations have used it. Over 2,500 data models across different verticals and industries, of course, have been developed with it. But so that's a little bit about Workbench. And I have this little architecture slide. Workbench it's a 3-tier architecture. And the first part here, there's like a big box in the middle. There's a React front end, and that's what we're going to be seeing today, basically. There's a graphical API layer, and then there's all the data that's Workbench captures about like the data models that you're working with, whatever. It actually gets stored in a Neo4j database, Aura. So, and the stuff at the bottom is, if you've used Neodash before, or even Neo4j browser, from your web browser, you can connect to a backend Neo4j database, and that's exactly what Workbench does as well. Even though it has its own database to connect to and store data, it lets you also connect to your own databases. And so that's pretty much it. And I'll talk about this in a second, but I don't know if you have other questions for me, Alexander, before we get into more of the meat.
Yeah, maybe just a little bit of a positioning question, I guess, is because you mentioned Arrows, and Arrows is a data modeling tool, right? So more or less, you if you haven't looked at it, so you get a blank canvas and you can add nodes to it, and then you can organize your graph in a way that you think, okay, this makes sense for me, and then you can share this as a picture, or even as a JSON file, and then you can actually import that into your graph database if you like. But it's more like you have a whiteboarding solution, and you draw a graph, and you see, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Let's call this label person maybe, or call this like acted in, and then discuss the type of the relationship. Is Cypher Workbench, because it has Cypher in its name, so yeah. Is it a modeling tool, or is modeling part of it, and then you have also, Cypher as the query language helps you the software helper features?
That's a great question. So the answer is yes to both of those questions. It is a modeling tool, and also deals with Cypher and helps you both kind of create and validate Cypher, and in some cases debug Cypher. In fact, a funny little story. This diagram that I'm showing on the slides now, this diagram was showed to me when I went to Neo4j new employee orientation back, like, roughly 7 years ago. And it still, I think, pretty much captures like what a newcomer's journey might be to Graph. If you are new to Graph, or even if you're just getting started with a new project, typically you want to start small. You have a set of questions, or a question or a set of questions you want to have answered. Then you go to the next step, which is your modeling step. You want to like engage like graph thinking, and how do I want to represent my domain? How do I want to represent those questions in a graph? But then you've got these sort of competing constraints. You want to be able to ingest your data, or have your data you actually have on hand, whether that's like in a relational database or JSON files or CSVs. You want to be able to pull that in so you can hydrate your graph. And then you want to have those questions actually be represented as like Cypher statements, for instance. And those Cypher statements have to also conform to the model. So what Cypher Workbench does is, the modeler is kind of there in the center with like an orange box. That's what most people have used. But there's other tools that sort of support, I'll call it like this developer journey, where you're capturing your question. You then start modeling with it. Later on, you can build Cypher queries. There's a bunch of sort of like cross-cutting features at the bottom. Like there's a little bit of collaboration. There's reverse engineering. There's a new tool called Reveal for doing like Cypher debugging or explaining. The one thing that's sort of missing is there's no like official data import stuff. So that's where there used to be a feature that it connected to Apache Hop. The code is still there, just not exposed anymore. Now there's some new stuff that I added, which we get a chance to show it later on, if I remember. You can actually export a model from importer, from Cypher Workbench, and then import it into Data Importer, which is like the data import tool that we use in Neo4j Aura. So anyway, that's a quick flyby of some of the stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you think? I mean, the Arrows is big again with the comparison here, but I think Arrows is obviously, if you are very deep in the graph space, you probably. Well, I think that's, now that I say it, probably not true. But I was thinking, wanted to say, Arrows is more for a beginner, and I outlining my graph a little bit and showcasing. Okay, here's the rough idea of my model that I have, and I want to show it to somebody. And I don't have something ready, so I'll draw it out, and then I do it there because it's easy. Later on, I would think probably you have a graph database running. You would visualize it from there. You can say, okay, here's my structure, here's my graph, how it looks like. Is Cypher Workbench meant to go with people from the beginning? Say, okay, here you go, and if you have nothing, you start there, and you helps you out modeling, but also takes you on the journey when you learn and when you get better, and to still use it across. From saying early beginnings to later in the development process.
Exactly. Yeah, so it does support this sort of start to finish journey, and I can walk you through kind of some easy scenarios, or I should say some scenarios like just with the movies database or Northwind or something like that. We can show that stuff. But it was also built to sort of support what I'll call like the professional services, or like the professional graph developer, right? A lot of times our professional services folks, and I used to be one when I joined Neo, you would get into like a customer problem or a customer environment where you just don't know what's going on, right? Like someone's already got a graph built, and what do they do? And so there's reverse engineering stuff where you can connect to the database and you can like pull back the model. Or if someone has like Cypher statements, you can actually parse the Cypher and look at the model for the Cypher, or then you could actually, there's some Cypher validation stuff where you can validate a Cypher statement against the model. You can run that Cypher statement like piece by piece against the database to see if like data exists for that Cypher statement to catch like errors and things of that nature. So there's a lot of little features like that.
Cool.
So let me break out of the slides. And what I'm going to do real quick, and Alexander, feel free to interrupt me at any time. But a couple of things. Oh, there's the slides. There's a bunch of help you can go out and look for. These things are here for your to look at later. There's like YouTube stuff. There's documentation, etc. The one thing that's important, if you're not, since Cypher Workbench running a SaaS, it's a private SaaS. If you're not a partner or a customer or an employee, you're going to have to install it on your own. And I'm not going to run through the installation, but if you go to the GitHub from Labs, there's a bunch of instructions here. And what you'll end up doing is, let me see if I can pull back my little, oops, here we go. So what I've done here is I've installed a Neo4j database just running locally on my machine. It's called Workbench. And over here, this terminal window over here represents the API it's running. So let me just stop it real quick. And the instructions will tell you how to do this, but each of the API and the UI components, it'll make more sense when you go through the GitHub. They have like an example environment variable file. You'll make that into what's called a .env file. And this contains like the information of how the API would connect to your Neo4j database. In this case, these are my Neo4j credentials. And this is the database Workbench. So let me just get out of that. And then you would do like an npm install, and the npm start will bring it up. So now the API is ready and it's listening. And the UI, I'm not going to stop and restart, but it's got its own env file that's pointing back to port 3. Sorry, I'm pointing to port 4000 to make GraphQL requests. Anyway, that's a little bit under the covers. So you'll have to go through that to get it running. But I think the instructions are pretty good. So once you do that, once the React app comes up, what you'll do is you'll see something. Let me actually log out here, and I'll make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, so you should see something like this. There is a default username and password. It's admin, and Neo4j is the password. You hit enter, and when you first come into Cypher Workbench, this is what you're going to see. Just as a quick tour, there are a bunch of tools, and these tools correspond to kind of that workflow we talked about before. There's the business scenarios, the modeler, Cypher Suite reveals the debugger, is Cypher Builder, and databases. Any questions you have, Alexander, before I kind of walk through like a little workflow?
No, not for me, but this is, again, the open invitation to anybody that's watching us live right now. If you have questions, comments, anything, then use the chat. I'll see your questions, and then I can read them out when they come in, or at least when there's a window where it makes sense to read them out.
Yeah, sure. So what you'll do, just I'll give you, if you haven't used arrows before, it is very similar. If you have used arrows, I should say, it's very similar to arrows. If you haven't used it, I'll just show you kind of what you'll do. We'll just call this like live model. So this is the title. We'll do a create. It's essentially a blank canvas. You can add node labels like this. You can type in something like this.
Maybe you want to zoom in a little bit, Eric.
Oh yeah. Let's see here. Let's do this. Let's see. Is that a little better?
Yeah, that is a little better.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, this is good. Yeah, this is good. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I got a new monitor, and now the monitor's got like huge resolution. So what, in order to make relationships, what you do, and Arrows works the same way as does Data Importer. What you do is you take your mouse and you hover real close to the side. You see this little gray halo come up. Then you click on that, you drag out, and then if you drop, you get a new node. If you do this and hover over another one, it creates a relationship like that. So this is how you draw your graph, or your model, really. So we can double click here. Let me see, double click. Let me, sometimes it gets fussy. Maybe because I'm zoomed in too high or something like that. There we go. So I'll just say company, and you can double click on the relationship to put something like that. Works at. So this is how you get started with modeling. And the one thing that, just a little bit of compare and contrast to arrows, and I'll get into that in a second. So arrows will let you do this. The one thing, arrows also let you do something like this, which is to add node labels, add properties. The thing where we start getting a little bit different is that, so for here, sorry if it's zoomed out a little bit, but what I'm doing is adding an ID property, adding a name property. Let me just delete this one. And I've got all the different data types here. Part of the goal of Workbench is to start off with a conceptual model, and then you want to then get down to where it's actually what I'll call like a grounded or an actual like model that you're going to use to support your data load. So you're eventually going to want to define the data types you have. You want to define not only like the major types of data you have and how they're related to one another, but then you actually want to get to the part where you're defining the actual properties, what the data types are. And then not only that, we have the ability here to add like this is a node key. It's, if you're not familiar with graphs that much, it's essentially the same as like a primary key in a relational database. But it helps to identify, essentially it sets up a combination of the label plus a property is the unique identifier for that node. So, okay. Yeah. And when you do this, there is lots of things that are kind of at your disposal here. So you can, much like arrows, you could export Cypher and create like a miniature graph. You can export the constraints here. and you could copy and paste these somewhere else in Workbench. You could do that, or you could copy and paste it typically into Neo4j browser to create those constraints for your database. And there's a couple of little things like this, like if you're dealing with LLMs, there's like an LLM version of it. The other one,
okay, that's good.
Yeah, and there's this one too. This will export it for data importer. So if you download this as a file, we can import it into data importer. I won't show that right now.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. The one. So now this is sort of the basics of modeling. Now let me sort of show you what a typical workflow might be for like a new engagement, and then we'll look also what might happen if you were like starting sort of in the middle. Like if you were, if you already had like existing artifacts.
Cool. Sounds good.
All right. So going back to, there's this little iconified view here. So going back to the question part. So we have a question, and we're going to build a model. So you would capture questions here in what I'm calling a scenario set. It's really a set of questions, live questions. And you click add scenario. Now, so the modeler is very rich as far as features. These other tools are not quite as rich, but they're okay. But let's say that we were dealing with movies, and we want to say like, okay, well, what actors did Keanu Reeves act with? That could be one. What genres of movies are popular? Who knows what your particular questions are? These are going to be specific to your domain.
Okay.
What you would typically do is you would start and you'd create a model, and what you do is the same modeler we just looked at is actually embedded in this tool as well. So you can add a node label just like we just showed just a second ago. You can also do something like this where you can like highlight this part and say like add this as a node label. We can add like this is a node label like this. So you could start building your model from the questions.
Okay.
Let me zoom in a little bit.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And now, so when you think about kind of like different ways of modeling, you start thinking about like conceptually, how do I want to represent this stuff? And you may be yourself a subject matter expert, or you may be working with like domain experts, and you want to engage those domain experts to kind of help understand what are the important relationships that exist in your domain. So in this case, like a movie is part of a genre. Actors like act in movies, things of that nature. So we'll do this. The other thing too is you want to sort of start maturing your model. So you can start here, for instance, and then once you sort of capture kind of the basics, you can always come back to the modeler here, and then you could like take over and like enrich it with properties and things of that nature. So the first part is kind of like questions to model, and then this part is more like sort of filling in your model more with actual we'll call it like the grounding of the model kind of. One thing I do want to point out, and this is something that people do in Arrows all the time, a little bit less so in Workbench, but let's just say that we've matured this model a little more, and we'll call this a person, and we'll make oops, start with that. We have movie and genre. Sometimes if you see things that are a little flaky like this little thing's going over here, there are bugs. What I normally do is like I just refresh the page, and voila, everything comes back. It's really robust as far as storing the information in the database. So one thing that a lot of people do in Arrows is they do what's called like an instance graph or an instance model, sometimes also called an example graph. So here we're dealing with the types of things like people and movies and things, but you might want to say, well, I need an example. Like, okay, so well, well, we have Keanu Reeves, and Keanu Reeves, acted, in The Matrix. So we can see that. We could even do something like this where we add Keanu Reeves as a person or an actor, and this sometimes gets a little funky like that, but we can add this as a movie. So you have this this instance model that corresponds to your actual data model.
Okay.
Now, what you might think about is, okay, well, so now going back to this workflow here, where was it? I got my questions, I got my model. Let's go ahead and actually write a query, right, and see kind of, can we answer a question with our model as it is? Not even, you don't even have to load data at this point, right? We can engage what I'll call the Cypher builder. I think it's called Cypher builder. Yeah. So we'll do a new Cypher builder here. Call this live Cypher. We create this, and what you do here is you select a data model. So this is one we are working on, and that's also going to show up here like this. Okay. And yeah, so you've got the model sitting over here, and what you can do then is you can add a match statement, and you've got a couple ways to go about building. You could add something here, like you could add like movie here if you wanted to. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to click this, and you see now we have this pattern. And as I do this, down here might be a little small, but there you see this Cypher statements getting built. That.
Okay. Yeah.
And if we want to find out or ask the question, what other actors has Keanu Reeves acted with, we could add another person node, and then we could connect back like that. And yeah. So you can help build a Cypher statement like this. We can add a return like this. And I don't think I define any properties, but we can go back here and just sort of show the iteration here. We can see here. Let's add just add like a name property, and let's add a title property. And I'll show you another thing real quick. So you see the properties aren't showing up, and the reason why that is because I previously turned off the display of the properties, but now they're back. So you can toggle them on and off here. Same with the secondary node labels, like that. And so now we've got this. Let's go back here to this, and I can return like movie title. I can return like a person's name, and that would be Keanu, I guess, probably. Or we might want to put a where clause in there, but we don't want to get you can add a where clause if you want, but for the purposes, I'll just skip it. But you've got this Cypher statement now, and now to create
that's kind of. Yeah. Can you zoom in a little bit into that, because that's.
Yeah. Let's see if I can see if this will.
Yeah, this was better. Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
this was better. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, this helps.
Okay. Now with this Cypher statement, I can go back and I can actually click this button here, which lets me associate a Cypher statement with this scenario. So now I have a question. Now I have a Cypher statement that goes along with it. So this kind of helps you complete that workflow. And you can even do things like you can validate the Cypher, and this is going to validate it against the model. You can also, just to show you some of the other validation stuff, you can, let me flip this one of these other tabs here. So quick aside, there's lots of data that's out there for you to play around with. This is, I think if you search for like Neo4j, like Aura data sets or something like that, you'll find this page. And these things like movies, they'll launch right into like a demo instance of Neo4j, which I've done over here. And so this is going to demo.neo4j.labs. Now in Workbench, what we can do is there's this other tool called the databases tool, and you can do like a file, like new connection. And what I've done before is I just type in like, movies, and then I filled out the the information here. So let me just show you what that looks like here. So this is the information, movies demo, like that. And I filled out the credentials, and you can test it and all that kind of stuff. So once you have this this database card, and also just note any passwords you put in here, they're encrypted, and they don't go back to the Aura database. They stay in your local browser storage. So your passwords never leave your local environment. So what you can do once you've got this is a couple things. One is you can connect to the database like this. And if you are like over here, for instance, perhaps you want to just like test this query out real quick. You could run it right here, and you get some results back. Yeah. So now you know the query is good. You could also, so let's do this. If I were to go like say like add genre, we could now I don't think there's any genre data in the database. So if we have no results, right? So another thing you can do is there's a couple other validation things I'll show you real quick. And this comes into play also when you're dealing with kind of getting started in the middle of an engagement. So one thing you can do is you can actually, once we're connected here, we can validate the model. And you'll see that right away. For one, our instance model, it's not going to have any data there, but it's going to go back to your database you're connected to, and it's going to introspect that you've got like 133 nodes, you've got 38 movies, acted in is good. There's no genre data. And so you can, it also does a bunch of static validations too. Like it says, well, genre has no properties. These things have no properties. You can turn off these things if you don't care about them. Or you can even like say delete, like maybe you're done with this instance model or something like that. So you can, I held the shift key and did a drag there, and held the shift key again, and I'm going to delete these items like that. So now I have more of a pure model. I can revalidate. And then, we just still see there's an issue with genre, but everything else is passing now. And then to sort of round us out, going to this tool, this Cypher Suite. Let me just do a new one real quick. New Cypher Suite. Let's call it New Cypher Suite. What you can do is you can do the same sort of thing. Let me pull that Cypher statement in here. So if I grab this, yeah. So even this will complain to you and say like sometimes yeah, exactly. All right. So here, let's just type this in. So this also has some validation where it'll go through and it'll progressively run the statement and say, okay, I've got person data, I'm good. I've got person acted in, I'm good. I've got person acted in movie, I'm good. And then it goes and starts trying out like longer and longer paths. And it's like, oh, well, I don't have some of these other stuff. I think this one might have the arrow might be wrong. That's one thing. But the, definitely the genre is not there. So that's sort of a whirlwind tour. There's a couple other things that I'd like to show. Well, I want to show reveal, for instance, but I also want to show a couple other things that are useful from like a reverse engineering perspective, and also show like a larger example. So before I do that, though, any questions I can answer, Alexander, or should I keep rolling through?
I think we can quickly touch base on something that Ramona brought up in chat. I think and David was helpful in answering it. Initially, maybe there was some confusion, and we can quickly talk about this. Ramona says, when you build the model from questions, don't you already assume that your data can answer those questions? Shouldn't you validate that your data represents what you assume? So she says, I can see a lot of issues when modeling in this way. But I think it comes down to obviously that you showcased a demo here, and you say, okay, this is how the tool works and what you do. I think Ramona is right in this case that this is not a good data modeling practice for sure. It's more of a demo application here, but
Yeah.
Nevertheless, while we talk about it, would you have some advice on data modeling practices and maybe how the Cypher Workbench could help in not in the scenario outlined here, but maybe generally help you graph data model better?
Yeah, it's a good question. So one comment on, should you model things where you might not have data for? And that's really an interesting kind of dilemma. And it kind of goes both ways, where sometimes people get engaged with like a business unit, for instance, and there's folks that are very business savvy, but they don't know the details of all the underlying data infrastructure your company might have. And so, but they want to capture the domain knowledge that this person has, because they have a specific problem that they need to solve. They need to think about it in like domain specific language. And so in that regard, sometimes it's useful to capture how that person views like the business problem and put that in graph form. Later on, then when you talk to the data engineers or the people that deal with the data, you may find out that that data does not exist, or or it exists, but it maybe not in the form that you would want to put it in the graph. So this happens all the time, and graph modeling is an iterative journey. And so there's a bunch of things probably online, maybe through the Neo4j Graph Academy courses, or some other like articles about best practices and stuff like that, where you start modeling, and then you basically, as you go through and you look at your data, and you're like, oh, okay, I got to change something. So you modify, you iterate, you try to answer the query. It's not going to work that way. I got to change my model. So I would say a lot of times people are iterating 3, 4, 5, maybe up to 10, 15 times before they get their model right. And so that's one thing. As far as tips go, I have a presentation I did for like the nodes conference a few years ago about like when to make something a property versus a node or relationship. So I could always share the link out later on with Alexander, which has some guidance. There's some other best practices too that that our professional services organization has, that I think there's like a PDF link that we could send you. It's a little bit old, but it has some really good information in there about kind of how to frame the problem, and really kind of using this philosophy of trying to answer like a business question to like narrow down the scope and get a win essentially.
Super.
To success. Yeah.
Cool. And then one more request, I guess, is if you could zoom in a little bit more.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Let me is that better? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Let me I zoom in a little bit as well from my side, but when I do this, I cut off some of the menu toggles. So yeah, I think this is better.
Okay.
Let us know if you need more zoom.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So real quick, let me show you like a slightly more sophisticated model. This is one that I've been working on. This is anti-money laundering, like fraud with PII or whatever. I forget what PII is. It's for like protected information or something like that. So this is going to be coming out in a couple of weeks through our marketing team. And it's going to have like a whole like story behind it and like stuff like that. But the what this does is it kind of captures more like a real world problem. And I have also over here, let me collapse this back. I think I have a scenario set related to this. So there's a bunch of things like rapid movement. And rapid movement is, if you click this, it like highlights the parts of the model that are being accessed like that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And let's go down to like maybe like high risk geo, for instance. I think it's hard to see. I think over here, it probably activated some stuff that wasn't activated before with country. And I think down here, maybe the shared PII or something might activate different things. Yeah, so shared PII is looking at like shared emails, shared devices, those sorts of things. So this is one way. if you went through and used this tool set to kind of, figure out or keep track of, your questions and how they relate to the model and that kind of stuff. One other thing too is,
yeah, I can imagine this is super helpful when you have like you just outlined before, is like you have the domain expert that necessarily doesn't write Cypher themselves, but knows exactly if they look at this and the graph, okay, they have this. This is my fraud pattern. This is what they touch. This is what I need to look into. And then you highlight the nodes that you want to be involved in this query, and then the person that writes the Cypher can then tune and fine tune and make sure that it actually does what it needs to be doing. And then you have the side by side view. You can see, okay, now this query and these nodes are touched. So this makes working on the data, I think, probably also lots easier.
Yeah. Thanks for that. The other thing you can do too is you can actually, I'm going to disconnect real quick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to import from a database. So I've got these different database cards set up here already. Northwind, movies, and those point to these example data sets. So we're going to look at Northwind here. In fact, what I'll do first is a lot of people do this. They'll do DB schema visualization, which is actually really good when it's a simple small graph. I'll tell you that a lot of people, once you get to like a medium complexity graph, this doesn't really work for them. And so that's when people might use something like Cypher Workbench to like look at the model instead. And I'll even call out Cypher Workbench because once the model gets super complex, even Cypher Workbench has trouble like displaying the model. So people have tried, just like say there's people that do models with like say like 500 node labels or 1,000 node labels and lots of different types of relationships and stuff like that. And it's just nutty. And so even at that point, Cypher Workbench breaks down and people end up actually writing like custom scripts to use Bloom. They'll actually like write a way to like, change the model into like a bunch of nodes, and so you can see it in Bloom. But what you can do in Workbench is you can like import a model from a database. So I'm going to import the Northwind model like this. And it's just super fast. So that looks pretty much the same as what we saw. The one difference is that we've got all the properties here. So all the properties.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
More details.
Yeah, the details are there. The one thing it doesn't do at the moment, I used to have this, and I think I took it out for some reason because maybe the syntax changed. I forgot to fix it. Was it's not introspecting the constraints, so it doesn't pull back the primary keys or the node keys at the moment. But so this is one thing you can do. Another fun thing you can do is let's see. Let's just do a new model. We'll call this reverse engineer from Cypher. So let's say you don't have a database at all. So we can like say, just so we're not doing anything funky, we'll disconnect this. I've got all this Cypher, or it's on this other screen. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to say parse Cypher. And this is lots and lots and lots of Cypher. I've got my rapid movement query. I've got my accumulation query. These are, queries that were going to be used for that money laundering stuff. And I can say parse Cypher. And, okay, you know what I did? I pulled in some stuff at the bottom that's not valid Cypher. Sorry about that. So let's try this again. And let's see. I got to zoom out. Okay, so if this happens, you can use one of these layout things. Let's see. So there you go.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it does a pretty good job of pulling back the stuff. The one thing it doesn't do a good job at is if you don't have like a node label, say you have like a open paren, closed paren, it doesn't understand like what that might be, and so it makes up this thing called a non, and so you'd have to go back and kind of try to fix that. But at least it gives you an idea of what the Cypher statement might be doing, or like the domain or something like that it's in. So that's another thing the tool can do. But I think now we've got about 10-ish, little more minutes left. I think it'd be good to show reveal, if that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's do this. And I've got like a third database set up. This is called this Station 3. And it has these things called stations and stops. And it actually comes from the documentation here, which is, sometime last year, Neo4j added what's called quantified path patterns. And this is a more sophisticated way to navigate or control how a graph is walked when you're answering a query. I found it conceptually a little bit difficult, the syntax, and that was one of the reasons I wrote Reveal, to kind of help me understand like what is going on, and also in other cases when you're doing like post processing, like if you have a more sophisticated Cypher statement, typically you'll have like a match, and then you'll add a bunch of with clauses where you're like manipulating the data. Sometimes it's kind of hard mentally to see what's going on. So I'll show you two examples, and see if you like it. So let's connect to this station database, and let me grab the query. Let's see here, this guy. Yep. Come on. All right. All right. So in Reveal, what you can do is you can just run it right away, and we don't have the nice formatting browser has as far as converting date timestamps and stuff into like a date string, but this is what the query does, and you're like, that's cool, but what's it really doing? And so what you do is you run the debugger, and one thing you'll notice at first is that there's extra variables that have been injected in here. If I stop this, you'll see that in the original query, there's like no variable here, no variable here. In order to actually kind of introspect what's going on, I need to have variables. So there's some query rewriting going on, but the query should be equivalent. So once you're here, you can click forward, and it's starting to run the query bit by bit. So first we call back stations. This is what's which is active, and we go forward again, and we get to Denmark Hill, and you can kind of just walk through this. So now we have calls at is in place, and so we don't even know what the other side of calls at is yet, because it's not in scope. And so now we see it's a stop. And you can there's this little widget down here which lets you control kind of how things are displayed. So if we want to change the color or something like that, we could do that. If we want to change what is displayed, we could do that there. But let's walk forward. And so here, now we get into the quantified path pattern part. And this might happen to you. The rewriting of the Cypher is not perfect. So typically if this happens, you just like step forward again and it recovers. Okay. So now what we can see is we had before, these were our two stops, and those stops there, right? Those become this stop here, and then the QPP, this next relationship, starts going on, and it happens 1 to 3 times. So in this case, you can see from 11, we're going one time here, but from 8, we're going 1, 2, 3 times. So you might, if you didn't have this tool, you might be thinking, well, what the heck's going on? But now this helps you understand how the graph is being walked. And so now we see their stops, and now this stop here is going to be all these stops. We're going to go out to calls at, and you see that's a new relationship that's being walked. Now we see those are all stations, and finally we filter out the other stations we don't want. And so we have our path. So we have 2 paths, and you see that there's actually 2 rows that are being returned from the driver. So this is what's being drawn, but this is actually what's back from when you're doing like a JavaScript query or like a Java or a Python query. This is the information that comes back here, 1 and 2. And it just so happens that these are then drawn over here on the right hand side. This is how browser works. This is how Bloom works. It's just that they don't really hide this stuff. Bloom hides this stuff. Browser doesn't hide it, but browser gives it to you like this. And it may be hard for you to follow along. So I think it's better looking at it like this. So that's one example. Let's move to a slightly more sophisticated example, and we'll switch our database now to, we'll switch it back to movies. And let's clear that, and we'll get rid of this. So I'm gonna skip over the 10 and 11. I'm gonna go straight to this one.
Okay.
Yep. And so this one shows you kind of how things work from a like post-processing perspective. So what we can do is I'll step through this time. This one steps like side by side in a line. This one steps down. So I'm going to use the step down one. We've got stop words. We got movies coming back. So now what we're doing now is in this Cypher is we're actually looking at the tagline and making it into words. So the tagline here might be "Welcome to the real world," and so we've split that and made an array out of it. And now we're going to unwind it. So interesting, you'll see the nodes over here disappear, and I'll tell you why that's happening. But you'll see the rows here. Welcome to the real world. So we have welcome is a row, to is another row, the real world. So you can see kind of line by line what's going on. And the reason why the other movies disappeared is because I have this limit up here, which is set to 10. You can change it to 20 or 30 or whatever. It goes up to 1,000. And if you want to like include more things, you can go back and then you can go forward. So you can step backwards and forwards as well. And so let's keep walking through real quick. So we've got now we've got a count. And I know this is not going to make a lot of sense to people, but I just want to show you kind of what happens as you click through. So this happens a lot too when you're doing post-processing of your match results, is you use this collect keyword a lot. So this lets collect, if you're not familiar with it, typically when you do like a match, you're going to return like a bunch of nodes or relationships or something like that. And it's going to be like, you're going to have each node might be in a different row. When you do collect, you collect everything up into like one list. So it becomes like one row based on your grouping criteria. So in this case, I'm grouping on word, and then everything else is getting either collected up or summed. So what happens is I've essentially transitioned from this thing here where we've got we basically have like one word, or I think like one word per row. And I'm going to go down here. I still have one word per row, but now any other movie that might have that word is collected up along with the number of times it's appeared. So like that. So we can keep going forward. And now it's getting more sophisticated here. For instance, now I've made a map of this where I've got A Few Good Men, where the word one has appeared twice, Rescue Dawn's appeared once, things like that, Life, these different movies. So these are things that people typically do when you're dealing with like trying to create a dashboard or trying to create some sort of analytic query to get like a number out or do some counts. And it can be quite difficult when you're just kind of doing it all in your head. So this helps you kind of see how the data is getting processed. So it gets, we just basically, we were doing like more groupings and stuff like that. But just to finish out real quick, I think eventually we're going to, so we create some relationships here between these virtual nodes and the actual nodes. But the real fun is seeing how the nodes and stuff like that get grouped in these rows. So anyway, with that, I will stop geeking out. And if there's any final questions or stuff,
we have a couple. One comes from David. David asks, is reveal a bit like explain in a SQL statement to show the query plan in order to optimize queries? Would that be a use case?
It is actually it's not actually like explain, and I'll tell you why. So there's two things that are happening when you're dealing. So like explain and profile, what they do is they take the Cypher query and they break it down into like internal Neo4j operators Like explain will say something like, oh, I need to do a like an expand all, or I need to do an eager aggregation or something like that, or I need to do an index seek. So explain will do those things, and it'll give you back lower level information that is inside like how Neo4j processes the Cypher statement. What reveal does is it looks strictly at the data level, and basically it's just trying to give you like a window into what the data would look like at any given point inside of a Cypher query. So there's definitely different use cases. What the explain or the profile might be good for performance tuning. The way Reveal is doing it might be good to kind of just see how the data is getting changed as the query gets executed. It'd be great to combine the two, but yeah, we haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah. And then another question from Thorsten. Thorsten asks, how good does the incremental debugger visualization scale with larger intermediate data?
Yeah, good question. If you go up to the limit of 1,000, this visualization on this side is written using the Neo4j visualization library, or NVL, which is the same library that powers Bloom and what's now like UPX under the Neo4j Aura environment. So it scales pretty well. It probably doesn't scale quite as well as like Bloom. They may have put some extra optimizations, but it's not bad. But there's the reason I did add the limit here was, for one, to reduce the amount of nodes coming back, but also two, you might have rendering issues based on your computer or whatever. So I would say use the limit, but you can go up to 1,000 if you have to.
Okay, good. And then maybe, yes, Peter, we will provide the link to the tips that Eric promised later in the YouTube video description. This is also where you will find all the other links that were mentioned today, but I'll share them, the link as well later on. And there was a question on availability, so maybe we can quickly talk about this one more time, Eric. Paulo asked, is this available in Neo4 Desktop? And somebody else asked if this is available on Aura. So maybe we need to make sure that people understand how to get to work with.
Yeah. So it would be nice if it was available in Neo4j Desktop, but it's not. It's actually only available if you go through to the GitHub website and you run through the instructions. So basically, you have to install it yourself, which means you create your own database. That database can be a desktop database, or it can be a Neo4j Aura database. And then you go click through this API folder and this UI folder, and these are JavaScript, or this is like a Node.js project, and this is like a React project. There's steps on how to essentially install the code and build it and run it locally. And so that's what you have to do if you want to get it running. The Docker image at the moment is a little bit out of date, so I would stay away from the Docker image and just try to build it right from source. And yeah.
But then once you build it, once it's running on your local machine, you can connect to any database you'd like, on Aura or on another desktop database. So that could be an option.
Correct. Yeah, it uses the Neo4j JavaScript driver inside, and that will let you connect to any Aura database. It'll let you connect to local databases. Yeah, you should be good to go.
Yeah, cool. That's very good. I now that we're seeing that we're out of time, so I think maybe quickly, and maybe this is more like a future question, is some of these things you showed today scream to me like could be extended with some magic AI features. Is that something you think of adding at some point? For the future of Cypher Workbench?
Yeah, definitely. I thought about it a little bit, but not too much. But if you have suggestions, yeah, please add them in like the YouTube comments or something like that for things that you might find useful. Because we're always looking for like good ideas to improve developer workflows and whatnot.
Cool, super. All right, thank you very much. With this, I think we are at the end of this episode. Next stream session, and this kind of like fits because you just mentioned NVL. is Clemens joining me, another Neo4j team member, on Thursday, to little unusual time zone, because Clemens is based in Australia. So we're doing this in the morning, my morning, European morning. So very, very early for US-based folks, unfortunately, but we will record it so you can watch it afterwards. Everybody that is sort of Asian time zone, that would be great. So you can join live, because this time zone obviously doesn't really work for you. So looking forward to having you join us on the graph visualization with NVL topic. And if you want to know more, want to read on, and want to continue the journey, then Graph Academy, as already mentioned by Eric, with some great data modeling courses and other things, is a place to learn. Neo4j Aura free, a great place to get your hands on Neo4j relatively easily. And if you have more questions, any more other topics you're interested in, you want to learn more about, or want to read up on, check our community pages and the events pages on neo4j.com/developer. And with that, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you particularly to Eric for showcasing the Cypher Workbench today, and for the demo, and obviously for your hard work of developing the tool in the first place.
Yeah. Happy to present, and thanks everyone for attending. It was great.
Super. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care, everybody, and see you soon. Until next time. Bye-bye.